Tonight, allow yourself to drift gently into the world of ancient myth with the gentle tragedy of Antigone. In a realm where destiny and rigid laws rule, one woman's unwavering loyalty to her brother shines like a beacon of defiance. Her journey resonates with themes of love, courage, and the delicate balance between duty and personal conviction. As you settle in and find your comfort, let this timeless tale of familial devotion guide you into restful slumber. And now, let the tale unfold. In the timeless city of Thebes, a heavy aura lingered in the air as the shadows grew long over the ruins of recent turmoil. The echoes of fate could be heard whispering of past deeds and inevitable futures. This city, once steeped in grandeur and legend, was now a place of somber reflection. Central to its tragic destiny was Oedipus, a former king whose tale of woe left an indelible mark upon the land. He had unwittingly fulfilled a prophecy by killing his father and marrying his mother, Jocasta. Upon the revelation of these grim truths, Oedipus was cast into exile, leaving his kingdom in a state of disarray and suffering from the consequences of his actions. Thebes groaned under the weight of this inherited curse, as a new chapter loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. In the wake of Oedipus's tragic downfall, Thebes found itself leaderless and in turmoil. The loss of its king sparked chaos as the city grappled with the void left by Oedipus's departure. The sons of Oedipus, Eteocles and Polynices, lingered in the shadows of their father's legacy, each eager to carve out a future amidst the echoes of past sins. With the throne now vacant, the struggle for power became inevitable, as the brothers confronted the task of not only rebuilding a kingdom, but also restoring dignity to a name marred by destiny. In a bid for harmony, the brothers agreed to share the rule of Thebes, taking turns to govern year by year. A fragile truce was forged, with Eteocles first ascending the throne, while Polynices awaited his turn patiently. Yet, as time wore on, so did Eteocles' grip on power. The allure of the throne whispered temptations of stability and control, and Eteocles, yielding to these temptations, refused to step down when his time ran out. This act of defiance shattered the tenuous peace that lingered within the city, sending ripples of discontent through the hearts of men, and ushering in the ominous footsteps of war. The refusal of Eteocles to honor his word sowed the seeds of civil conflict, igniting a bitter feud between brothers. Enraged, Polynices found himself cast out of the city, left to wander and plot his return. He rallied an army, comprised of allies from distant lands who shared in his desire for justice and reprisal. Their march upon Thebes heralded a war that would paint the very soil of their homeland with the echoes of familial strife, as kin turned against kin, driven by a thirst for power as ancient as man itself. Battle swept across the plains surrounding Thebes, a brutal clash that cast the city into further despair. The wailing cries of warriors rose like mournful songs into the night air, and the clash of steel became an unending lament. As day turned to dusk, the fields bore the weight of countless struggles, leaving chaos and desolation in the wake of familial discord. Amidst the ferocity and flames, Eteocles and Polynices met their ultimate fate, falling by each other's hand, a grim testament to the follies of kinship torn asunder by ambition. The tragedy complete, Thebes was left aching for guidance and leadership as echoes of the brothers' battles rang perpetually in the ears of its people. In the aftermath of this catastrophic conflict, Thebes stood somber and leaderless. The death of Eteocles and Polynices left the throne vacant once more, casting the city into a deeper chasm of uncertainty. With no heirs to take the mantle, Thebes required a new leader, one who could navigate the treacherous waters left in the wake of these grievous losses. It was at this critical juncture that Creon, the brother's uncle and a man of resolute stature, stepped forward, claiming the throne with a firm intent to restore order and peace to his beleaguered. City. Creon's rise to power marked a new era for Thebes, one characterized by authoritative governance and an uncompromising adherence to the rule of law. With a heart burdened by both duty and familial loyalties, Creon issued his first edict to set a stark example for both his subjects and the gods. He decreed that Eteocles, who had defended Thebes, would be honored with a hero's burial, while Polynices, seen as a betrayer for waging war against his own people, would be denied the dignity of a proper burial. Polynices' body was to remain unburied, left exposed to the elements, as a warning to any who might consider defiance. Thus, in this tale of strife and resolution, the stage was set for an even greater tragedy. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting the battlefield in hues of orange and red, silhouetting the remnants of shattered shields and spears. The somber calm of dusk settled over Thebes as the city, now under Creon's stern rule, awaited the events that the hand of fate would deliver next, with each Theban heart bracing for the choices soon to unfold. In the quiet city of Thebes, Antigone stood amidst the shadows lengthening across the room, a silent witness to the calamities that had befallen her family. The tragic loss of her brothers Eteocles and Polynices weighed heavily upon her heart. Their mutual destruction was more than a family tragedy. It was a testament to the brutal hand of fate that seemed to crush everything in its path. The air inside her home was thick with mournful silence, broken only by the distant echoes of a city grappling with the aftermath of war and leadership struggles. As Antigone reflected on the shattered remains of her family, her thoughts spun endlessly between her duty to her kin and the ironclad laws now decreed by King Creon, her uncle. Antigone's inner turmoil simmered quietly beneath her stoic exterior. She pondered the essence of loyalty and justice, finding herself caught in a web of ancient laws and deep-seated familial love. How could she let her brother Polynices, though labeled a traitor, lie unburied and dishonored? The edict declared by Creon was unyielding. Eteocles would receive all honors in death, while Polynices' body was to rot in disgrace, forbidden the sacred rites that granted peace in the afterlife. To Antigone, these rites were paramount. Her conviction that divine law and familial duty outweighed any edict from man grew with each passing moment of contemplation. Antigone soon sought the counsel of her sister, Ismene, whose cautious nature was well known. Their conversation was steeped in the shadows of caution and fear, as Ismene urged her sister to obey the king's decree. "Think of the cost," Ismene pleaded softly, a worry etched upon her face. She feared not only for her sister's safety, but also for the inevitable consequences challenging Creon's authority would bring upon their household. Yet, Antigone's resolve was unshakable. Her response, calm yet firm, was anchored in a deep-seated belief in the righteousness of her cause. The honoring of her brother was a sacred duty she could not forsake, regardless of the earthly repercussions that might follow. "Let us remember our bonds of blood," Antigone declared, her voice steady with purpose. Even as Ismene quietly refused to take part in this forbidden task, her warnings of peril were clear and heartfelt. Antigone understood her sister's fear, but felt the undeniable pull of her mission overshadowing all else. She was prepared to bear the burden alone, propelled by a strong sense of obligation and a moral compass pointing unerringly toward what she believed to be just and proper. This solitary defiance only made Antigone's determination burn brighter. Alone but undeterred, she reflected on her place within the threads of destiny that seemed to entangle her every step. Inspired by noble duty, Antigone set about gathering the necessary items for the burial rites, each task bringing her a step closer to fulfilling her vow. Quietly and methodically, she prepared. Her actions were not a rebellion against Creon personally, but a firm stand against a decree she knew in her heart could not hold sway over divine justice. Deepening shadows outside marked the transition from day to night, the cloak of darkness providing Antigone with the anonymity she needed for her clandestine act. The clear, starry sky above seemed to guide and guard her steps as she quietly slipped away from her home, a shrouded basket in hand, and a lamp casting a soft glow in the evening's hush. The city of Thebes, muted by the late summer night, lay beneath her as she set her feet upon the path toward the battlefield where her brother's body lay. Antigone's journey through the silent streets conveyed a charged sense of urgency, yet her movements were precise and her resolve unwavering. The silver light of the stars and the warm glow of her lamp lit her path, enclosing her in an atmosphere of determination and secrecy. The canopy of night was her ally, its vast eternal presence mirroring her inner resolve as she walked, each step an affirmation of her commitment to honor Polonices in death. In the hushed solitude of that night, Antigone's act of defiance began. Soon, it would reverberate throughout the city of Thebes, setting into motion a series of events that would challenge Creon's edicts and test the limits of law, loyalty, and love. As Antigone vanished into the enveloping night, her heart was both lightened by purpose and burdened by the awareness of what lay ahead. In the stillness of the night, Antigone moved with careful deliberation through the deserted streets of Thebes. The city lay shrouded in shadows, its cobblestone paths echoing softly beneath her cautious steps. Her heart was a steady rhythm of resolve, each beat a silent vow to honor her brother in defiance of the edict that weighed heavily upon her people. Guided by the faint glow of the stars, she ventured towards the battlefield where Polonice's body lay unclaimed, exposed to the elements, a somber testament to the tragic conflict that had unfolded. Upon reaching the desolate plains outside the city, the remnants of war cast an eerie tableau in the lunar glow. Broken shields and discarded spears lay like silent witnesses to the strife that consumed her brothers, Eteocles and Polonices. Antigone stood at the threshold of this grim place, inhaling the night air tinged with the faint scent of upturned earth. The battlefield, stripped of the fervor of battle, became a sacred ground upon which she treaded with reverence, her resolve unwavering as she approached the lifeless form of her brother. There, in the shadow of the city walls, Antigone knelt beside Polonices, her presence marked by a solemn reverence. Her fingers brushed against the cold, lifeless skin, an acknowledgement of the blood they shared and the love that time could not sever. She adorned his body with a gentle layer of earth, as if the very soil recognized the sacredness of her task. The act, forbidden by law, became her act of defiance and devotion, a silent prayer to the gods who watched over ancient struggles and mourned with the living. With each handful of earth, she whispered memories and blessings, her voice barely above a breath. It was a sacred litany, cleansing his spirit and guiding it towards peace. Antigone's hands moved gracefully, scattering clods of soil, mingled with tears that welled unbidden yet flowed in quiet acceptance. Her gestures were deliberate, infused with the weight of her purpose and the love she bore for her fallen brother. The earth embraced him tenderly, a shroud of dignity against the indignities that royal decree had sought to impose upon his death. In those fleeting moments, Antigone allowed herself to grieve openly. Her heart, heavy with loss, found solace in the finality of the rites, both an end and a beginning bound together in the timeless cycle of life and death. Silently, she bade her brother farewell, as the stars blinked their silent approval above, a celestial audience to her quiet rebellion. Within the stillness, a sudden rustling pierced the calm, breaking the spell and stirring her into urgency once again. Driven by instinct, Antigone drew her cloak tighter and slipped into the encircling dark, masking her presence from prying eyes. Hidden within the folds of night, she kept to the shadows, her mind alert to the need for stealth and caution as echoes filled the vast empty space. Despite the shadows of uncertainty closing around her, Antigone's heart brimmed with satisfaction. She had achieved what she set out to do, an act of love and defiance defying the heavens and the laws of men. Yet, beneath the surface of her tranquility, a whisper of dread lingered at the periphery, a reminder of the inevitable consequences of her actions. The night tensed, coiled like a spring with the promise of discovery that the dawn's light would soon reveal. As Antigone retreated from the battlefield, blending into the fabric of Theban life, her mind flickered with reflections of duty and destiny. The quiet streets led her back, leaving behind the place that had witnessed her bold assertion of loyalty. In the lingering silence of the night, the stage was set, the act concluded, yet the repercussions hovered on the brink of morning, a prelude to the day's unveiling and the proclamations it would herald. As the first rays of dawn spread over Thebes, the tranquility of the morning was quickly overshadowed by the discovery that Polynices' body had been disturbed. The guards, tasked with maintaining the sanctity of the king's decree, stood bewildered amidst the battlefield's desolate remnants. It was evident that someone had dared to defy the royal edict, covering the corpse with earth in an act of forbidden piety. The whispers of the news swept through the city streets like wildfire, leaving a sense of unease in their wake. Soon, a guard, trembling yet resolute, presented himself before King Creon. The throne room, bathed in the warm hues of sunlight filtering through, seemed to mirror the fiery intensity of Creon's reaction. The guard's report was met with a thunderous silence that hung in the air, laden with Creon's burgeoning fury. He paced the room, the weight of the crown heavy upon his brow, as his thoughts churned between upholding the laws of the state and the delicate threads of family ties. Creon became lost in his internal struggle, torn between his duty as a ruler and his feelings for his family. The crown was not just a symbol of power, but a relentless burden of responsibility. His edict was an immovable pillar of state law, representing order and justice, or so he believed. But beneath that veneer of authority lay an undercurrent of familial tension that gnawed at the edges of his decisions. Polynices was his nephew, yet his actions warranted punishment. Emotions ebbed and flowed within Creon as he grappled with the consequences of defying divine and earthly decrees alike. Resolute, Creon knew that this act of defiance could not go unpunished. His proclamation was clear: the citizen responsible for this breach of law would face severe repercussions. It was imperative to uphold the order he had so painstakingly established, and his decision resonated throughout the palace halls. Creon called upon his guards, commanding them to leave no stone unturned in their search for the dissenter. His voice carried the weight of unyielding resolve, leaving no room for dissent as he reinforced his position as king and enforcer of Theban law. In the heart of the city, Creon's dialogue with the chorus echoed with an unwavering fervor. The chorus, representing the voice of the people and traditions, provided a moral compass amidst the commotion. Creon addressed them with the conviction of his authority, seamlessly weaving his justification for harshness into the fabric of duty. The chorus, cautious yet compliant, acknowledged the necessity of Creon's resolve, even as a subtle undercurrent of apprehension rippled through them. The guards, compelled by the king's directive, embarked on their grim task with newfound urgency. The city of Thebes became a hive of speculation and unrest as rumors of the defiance spread from lip to ear. Murmurs of discontent wound through the marketplace and the homes of its citizens. The sense of dread festered, casting a shadow over the late summer sun. The guards pressed on, eyes wary and ears keen, knowing full well that their failure to apprehend the defiant figure would bring about the king's wrath. As each hour passed, the pressure on the guards escalated. The weight of Creon's expectations bore down upon them, a reminder of the stakes at play. The edict was a test not just of loyalty to the throne, but of the upholding of civic order against chaos. Every corner of the city felt the scrutiny of their gaze. Every whisper carried the potential for betrayal. In the eyes of Creon, justice demanded sacrifice, and the lines between duty and familial bonds grew ever more blurred. Within the throne room, Creon remained seated, his presence dominating. Flame-lit torches flickered on the walls, casting formidable shadows that seemed to mimic the king's stern resolve. His resolve became an unwavering force, and his stance unyielding. Amidst the tension, a quiet determination burned brightly within him, knowing that his iron will was imperative to steer Thebes through tumultuous waters. With the search intensifying, Thebes continued to hold its breath. The defiance had awakened something deeper within the city, a realization that beneath its serene exterior, the currents of fate were guiding events to an inevitable confrontation. In silent corners, people discussed the events in hushed tones, wondering who bore such audacity. And as the day journeyed towards its close, the air held a pregnant pause, signaling the nearing moment when truth would emerge from the shadows. The groundwork was laid for a revelation, the discovery that lay just beyond the horizon. Antigone's daring act had set into motion a series of events that would reshape lives and test loyalties. The pathway was carved with the dictates of fate, compelling Creon and those bound to him by kin and duty to face a reckoning of their making. In the bright and clear late summer day that bathed Thebes with an austere and keen light, a silent yet consequential scene unfolded on the outskirts of the city. Antigone, moved by her steadfast commitment to honor her brother Polynices, dared to return to the site of his burial. The calm morning hour belied the tumult that was to follow as guards, vigilant and driven by Creon's decree, lay in wait, anticipating another silent act of defiance. Her mission was clear and her resolve unshaken, but fate's hand moved swiftly, and as she approached the subtle mound of earth, the guards sprang into action. Their capture of Antigone was swift and inevitable, the clink of chains a solemn declaration of her fate. Brought before Creon in the throne room, Antigone stood tall, her demeanor unfaltering despite the weight of the impending confrontation. The sun pouring through the tall windows cast long shadows, framing this moment of high tension. Creon, upon seeing his own niece standing accused, found himself momentarily paralyzed by a mix of disbelief and anger. His stern countenance was betrayed by a flicker of familial recognition, but quickly hardened again under the influence of his kingly duties. Antigone's capture was not merely an act of law enforcement. It was a familial ordeal, underscoring the profound schism between Creon's edicts and Antigone's unwavering loyalty to family and divine. Law.d. In the tense air of the throne room, Antigone boldly confessed to her actions, refusing to cower under the weight of her crime. Her words, though spoken with serene conviction, rang as strongly as any bell of justice. She invoked the sacred rites of family and the unwritten laws of the gods that she believed transcended those of man, speaking with the clarity and honesty of one whose path was clear and unavoidable. Her defiance was not born of rebellion for its own sake, but from a deeply held conviction in the sanctity of familial bonds and divine will, ideals she honored even at the cost of her own life. Creon, tasked with the dual roles of king and uncle, found himself torn between his duty to uphold the law and the undeniable bond of family. As Antigone stood defiantly, he grappled with disbelief that blood could so brazenly challenge authority. His anger simmered beneath a facade of stoic control, hissed into being by his frustration at her unwillingness to yield. Yet, as much as fury colored his initial reaction, it was disbelief that shadowed him now, a disbelief that morphed into a sense of betrayal, for how could someone of his blood choose such a perilous path? Their ideological clash was as inevitable as it was poignant. Antigone, the unyielding spirit, cast her assertions against the stone of Creon's authority. She spoke of duties that surpassed mortal edicts, of obligations to family that resonated beyond the grave, and of eternal laws that held sway in every true heart. This collision of convictions, the state's mandate against the sanctity of kin, pulled at the very seams of Theban society and challenged Creon's every judgment. These contrasting positions created a storm of emotions that swirled unchecked within the sanctity of the throne room. Despite his internal struggle, Creon's resolve to uphold the consequences of Antigone's defiance took center stage. He was a man of unbending principles, committed to his vision of justice as order, and knew he must act decisively. To do otherwise, he believed, would cast a shadow over his reign and beckon disorder back from the edges of Thebes' fragile peace. Creon, girded by his understanding of duty, made his choice: to let laws stand firm, to sacrifice kin over state, and to tether his judgment to the unyielding certainty of decrees made public. Meanwhile, the chorus, a witness to this unfolding familial and moral drama, offered a reflection not so much as condemnation, but as observation. Their collective voice intoned contemplations on the inescapable cycle of pride and power, and the tragedies wrought by such inflexible stances. They pondered the relentless path of fate that seemed always to subtly guide, yet never show, a way clear and acceptable to the hearts of men. The chorus reflections served not only as a mirror to the sorrowful events, but also as a gentle reminder of the inherent human struggles between honor and authority. As Antigone left the throne room under the vigilant watch of Creon's guards, the kingdom's turmoil simmered beneath the apparent tranquility of the day. Hers was a choice that echoed through the silent corridors of power, leaving both personal and political consequences in its unyielding wake. The stage was set for a sentence that would reverberate through the annals of time, leaving Thebes to wrestle with the aftermath of this noble defiance. The light of the late afternoon sun spilled through the windows of the Theban royal chamber, glowing in amber hues that cast long shadows across the floor. Haemon, the son of King Creon and Antigone's devoted betrothed, was consumed with despair. News of Antigone's arrest for defying Creon's decree had reached him like a tempest, shaking his world to its very core. The knowledge that the woman he loved faced an unimaginable fate filled him with urgency and resolve. Determined to save her, Haemon made his way to his father with a heart full of love and reason, hoping to sway Creon's rigid stance. As he stood before Creon, Haemon knew the challenge he faced. His father was not just a king, he was a man bound by the sense of duty that defined his rule. Creon, the embodiment of law and order, sat with a demeanor as unyielding as the stones of the palace itself. Yet Haemon, buoyed by the depth of his love for Antigone, spoke earnestly. He implored Creon to consider love and reason over the harshness of strict justice, emphasizing the virtues of compassion and empathy. The air between them was heavy with unspoken tension, much like the conflict of law and love that waged silently within the walls. Creon listened to his son, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. There was love for Haemon in his heart, yet there was also the weight of the crown pressing upon him. As Haemon spoke, Creon's mind racing with thoughts of duty versus affection. The presence of the sacred balance of order he had sworn to maintain clashed against his paternal instincts. He was torn, like a ship caught between the rock and the stormy sea, knowing that steering either way could lead to ruination. The room seemed to shrink around the two, amplifying the intensity of the moment. Haemon's pleas were heartfelt and urgent, but they clashed against the wall of Creon's resolve. The young man's appeals for clemency were not merely for Antigone's life, but a plea for the kind of compassion that elevates humanity above the rigidity of law. Creon, however, feared the perception of weakness among his subjects if he were to relent, concerned that bending even once could unravel the authority upon which his reign and the city's stability depended. Haman's desperation grew as he realized that his father's resolve remained unshaken, like the immobile pillars of the throne room. Although his arguments were steeped in reason and compassion, it appeared they could not penetrate the iron will of a king clinging to the tenets of law. The shadows lengthened with the passing time, as did the chasm between father and son. As Haman's despair deepened, he felt a painful resignation settle over him. Despite his best efforts, he could see that Creon would not change his mind. The love he had for Antigone, pure and unwavering, clashed against the unwavering resolve of his father's decree. It was a love caught in the crossfire between familial duty and public obligation, a clash that could only yield heartbreak. In a solemn vow, Haman pledged his unwavering loyalty to Antigone. His heart ached with an intensity that words could never capture, but his actions spoke volumes. Silently, he turned away from his father, his steps heavy as he left Creon in a tumult of silent turmoil. The decision was a tempest, altering the trajectory of their lives irrevocably. Within the confines of the royal chamber, only shadows and sword bore witness to the clashing forces of love, law, and fate. The golden light of the afternoon waned as Haman departed, leaving Creon alone to grapple with the storm within. The turmoil simmered beneath the surface like a distant rumble of thunder, hinting at the devastation that awaited them all. Haman's love and despair spread like ripples in a pond, setting the stage for the inexorable march of fate. In the heart of Thebes, as the sun descended and cast long shadows over the ancient city, its people gathered anxiously. Their murmurings filled the air, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity about the fate of Antigone, the daughter of Oedipus. King Creon, with a heavy heart and a sense of duty to the laws he had decreed, stood before the assembled crowd. His voice, steady yet somber, resonated through the square as he declared Antigone's punishment. She was to be entombed alive, a living death, for defying royal edict. This sentence, harsh and unyielding, was not just a punishment, it was a declaration of the state's power over individual will. The gravity of Creon's decision spread through the crowd, some nodding in fear of the law's iron fist, while others whispered with hearts full of sympathy for the young woman about to face her own demise. Antigone stood unmoved, a figure of serene defiance amidst the swirling emotions of the gathered citizens. Her composure was striking. She had embraced her fate with a quiet dignity, unwavering in her resolution to honor her brother Polynices. For Antigone, the laws of the divine held greater weight than the laws of man, and in her heart she knew her course was just. With a serene expression, she regarded the murmuring crowd, understanding their fear but remaining resolute in her actions. Her mind was clear, her conscience untroubled by doubts as she prepared to meet her destiny. Just as the sentence was announced, Ismene, Antigone's sister, arrived breathless. Her eyes pleaded with Creon, desperation etched into every word as she begged for her sister's life. But Ismene's pleas fell on ears closed by kingly duty and familial anguish. Antigone, with gentle resolve, turned to her sister, offering reassurances that came not from ignorance of her fate, but from a purposeful embrace of it. She had no regrets for her actions, no sorrows for the path she had chosen. Her only solace lay in the honor she had brought to the memory of her brother. Ismene's tears could not sway her, nor break the calm that wrapped around her like a protective cloak. The chorus, ever the reflective voice of the people and the gods, spoke of destiny's inexorable march and the human folly of pride. Their words lingered in the air like an ancient hymn, echoing the tales of hubris that had been the downfall of many a great ruler before Creon. Their reflections were not just a cautionary tale, but a reminder of the cyclical nature of history and fate's indifferent hand. As they sang, the stones in the city seemed to remember, pinning the weight of history upon the event unfolding before them. With her fate sealed, Antigone was led through the streets of Thebes towards the outskirts where her living tomb awaited. The procession was somber, a silent witness to the tragic tale unfolding. Her path mirrored the sorrow of the city and its people, a reflection of the fate that loomed over all. Alongside the dimming light of dusk that cast deep shadows on the rocky tomb, Antigone took one last look at her city, her home. It was a glance filled with unspoken words, a farewell to a life lived with unwavering loyalty to both family and belief. The chains that bound her were not just physical but symbolic, the constraints of the laws that had brought her to this end, and the finality of the fate that awaited her within the cold embrace of the stone. Yet, even as the shadows stretched across the landscape, there was a palpable sense of dignity that surrounded her. Antigone's courage and steadfastness in accepting her fate resonated not just with those who watched but across time, a testament to her unyielding spirit and valor. Thus, as the last light of day faded, enveloping Thebes in the shroud of night, the kingdom itself braced for the ripples of consequence that would follow Creon's decision. Fate, having played its relentless hand, awaited further moves in this tragic dance of destiny, honor, and the ceaseless march of time. Antigone stood at the entrance of her final refuge, the tomb of cold stone that awaited her. The world outside seemed to hush as she stepped into the dim interior, a soft glow from a tiny opening casting gentle light upon the smooth walls. In that sacred silence, the weight of her choice and the certainty of her fate enveloped her, yet her heart knew no fear. Solitude greeted Antigone with open arms, and she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the life she was leaving behind, a life marked by loyalty, love, and inevitable surrender to destiny. Her thoughts meandered through memories of her brothers Eteocles and Polynices, whose tragic ends in battle had brought her to this somber end. Despite the grievous events that had unfolded, she cherished the bond they shared, a bond that transcended the laws of men and warranted her defiance in their honor. Sealed within these walls, Antigone felt a profound connection to the ancestral spirits that had gone before her. As she recalled the valiant yet sorrowful histories of her lineage, a melancholy song formed in her heart. It was a lament both tender and enduring, one that she sang softly, echoing off the bare stones as if to comfort her soul. Her voice, calm in its resolve, spoke of family, of duty, and the noble ends that such devotion sometimes demanded. Amidst the solitude, her heart soared with the thought of reunion in the realm beyond. She envisioned Eteocles and Polynices with the ancestors, waiting in a place where judgment and mercy intertwined beneath the gaze of the gods. To Antigone, death was but a temporary separation, a doorway to an eternity shared with loved ones, unbounded by the strife of mortal conflicts. Her faith in this vision granted her a sense of peace that lingered in the chamber's stillness. The chilling silence of the tomb was a stark contrast to Antigone's inner strength. As the moments passed with the stealth of shadows, her resolve remained unwavering. She pondered the justice of divine laws that superseded human decrees, confident that adherence to these eternal rules would lead her to a righteous end. Despite her young age, Antigone had glimpsed the futility of opposing fate, choosing instead to embrace its dictates as guided by her unwavering values. In her solitude, she meditated on the eternal nature of the soul. The transient trials of life were but fleeting chapters in a story much grander, and she found solace in this timeless truth. The walls seemed to breathe with her calm acceptance, no longer the confines of a tomb but witnesses to her steadfastness. The quiet space resonated with the certainty that the true essence of being lay not in physical liberty, but in the freedom of one's spirit and convictions. As night deepened to an indiscernible hour, Antigone wrapped herself in the warmth of her beliefs, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for the clarity she had gained through her ordeal. The acceptance of her impending end came not as a concession, but as a triumph of integrity over fear. In these last moments, she found comfort in the knowledge that to remain true to what she believed was the highest calling, and that she had honored it with grace. Outside the stone enclosure, unseen yet felt, the winds of change began to stir within Thebes. The repercussions of Creon's decision, the very decree that had locked Antigone in her tomb, loomed in the minds of those beyond the silent stone. As Antigone lay in quiet reflection, the seeds sown by her quiet rebellion began to germinate in the land she loved, setting the stage for reckonings of a different kind. In the waning light of early evening, an unsettling air permeated the court of Thebes. The throne room, with its high vaulted ceilings and shadowed corners, stood as a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Creon, restless and burdened by the weight of his decisions, sat in his regal seat. It was then that Tiresias, the venerable blind prophet known throughout Greece for his unfailing insight, was ushered into the chamber. With the gentle tap of his staff echoing on the stone floors, Tiresias advanced, his presence transforming the air into one thick with anticipation. Tiresias approached Creon, his sightless eyes seeing far beyond the immediate, into realms where even kings dare not tread. As he began to speak, his voice carried an urgency and foreboding that immediately hushed any murmurings within the court. He conveyed the message of the gods, a portent of wrath that could neither be ignored nor defied. The gods, he revealed, were displeased with Creon's decree to leave Polynices unburied and to punish Antigone for her act of familial piety. Their wrath, he warned, would be swift and unrelenting if Creon did not relent. "Creon," Tiresias intoned, "heed the will of the divine. The unburied dead cries unto heaven, and the living entombed cries within stone. This path draws doom to your house and land. Release the girl and bury the fallen." The prophecy unfurled like a darkening veil over Creon, who could only sit, his skepticism visible in his steady gaze. The kings of ancient tales had often grappled with the forewarnings of seers, and Creon was no different, mired as he was in the conviction of his own laws. Despite his respect for Tiresias, Creon's pride initially wrestled with accepting the possibility of such dire predictions. His rational mind sought evidence, a justification beyond spiritual persuasion, despite the renown of the prophet's accuracy in the history of Thebes. Yet the signs, Tiresias insisted, were manifold. Fires refusing to ignite, their flames sputtering in the windless air of the altars. The cries of birds, their songs twisted into eerie auguries, as if nature itself rose in opposition to the king's stubbornness. These omens served as harbingers, declaring the increasing discontent of the heavens. Unsettled by these revelations, Creon found his heart heavy with an unfamiliar doubt. Though the urgency in Tiresias's words began to crack the armor of his certainty, he struggled to suppress his reluctance, fearing that yielding would undermine his authority. This stubbornness whispered appealing falsities of maintaining the stability of Thebes through uncompromising rule. Tiresias, sensing the tumult within Creon, pressed on, imploring him to reconsider his path. "Stubbornness is not strength, O king," he counseled. "Staunch decisions that stand against divine justice shall only break beneath the inevitable." The air thickened, straining under the invisible weight of fate and choice. Creon, surrounded by flickering shadows and the somber presence of his advisors, felt the isolation of holding power. The realization that his decisions now teetered between doom and redemption stirred unease. In Tiresias's final plea, a reluctant acknowledgement began to germinate within Creon's mind. The truth of prophecy whispered to him in the deceptive quiet of the throne room, and slowly he recognized the potential squander to his kingdom's safety. It was a profound moment, a reminder that the caprices of power must always tilt towards justice, or risk becoming a ruinous burden. Though still grappling with his resolve, Creon found the seed of understanding settling deeper. The echoes of fate, once dismissed as distant, now resonated near, urging him towards reflection and action. As Tiresias withdrew and shadows reclaimed the chamber, Creon lingered in the silent company of his thoughts. The prophet's words left an indelible mark, a realization that perhaps the course he charted was not steadfast, but perilously fragile in the face of divine will. With Tiresias's somber words still echoing in his mind, Creon found solitude in the spacious halls of his palace. The walls seemed to close in on him with every step he took, his thoughts tangled in a web of doubt and responsibility. The prophet's warnings about the wrath of the divine played on repeat in his mind as he paced, wrestling with the choice thrust upon him. To relent meant acknowledging fault, a blow to his pride as a ruler, yet ignoring the prophecy could spell doom for his beloved Thebes. Creon sought counsel from his advisors, their faces drawn with concern as they gathered in a small, dim chamber. Despite their cautious demeanor, they hinted at a reconsideration of his actions. One after another, they reminded him of the heavenly omens and the potential peril waiting if he continued along his current path. Duty-bound, they tread lightly around his pride, a formidable fortress he had reinforced with years of rule. Yet, their collective unease was palpable, urging him, without words, to listen to the whispers of destiny and retract his edict. Inside, Creon faced a tempest of internal conflict. To maintain his authority as king was paramount in his mind, a principle that had guided his reign with steadfast resolve. Yet every fiber of his being was aware of the stakes. The very future of Thebes hung in a precarious balance. Polynices, though a rebel in life, still demanded the dignity of peace in death, while Antigone's unyielding spirit haunted the chambers of his conscience. He had wanted to exemplify order through stern decisions, but now he saw them cast long, shadowy specters of potential calamity. Reflecting on this, the notion of leadership and the sacrifices it demands weighed heavily on him. Pride had guided his hand in the past, steering him through trials and triumphs alike. However, in the quiet moments overlooking Thebes, he discerned that pride could be both a beacon and a burden. Understanding this duality with newfound clarity, he pondered the price of stubbornness, recalling tales of past leaders and their falls from grace, each echoing in his heart with a warning he could not ignore. The chorus, a vocal reminder of the city's collective conscience, cut through his ruminations. They sang softly, their tone weaving humility into the air around him. Their melody was a gentle nudge toward acceptance of imperfection and acknowledgement of the mistakes woven into the fabric of his reign. The words carried an ancient wisdom, imploring him to choose understanding over obstinacy and empathy over estrangement. Breaking the solitude of his reflection, Haman entered, his demeanor a mirror of the desperation and hope Creon himself felt. Pleading yet again for Antigone's life, Haman spoke with earnest conviction, each word cutting through the stagnant air of the council chamber. His love for Antigone burned brightly, casting long shadows of grief and loss yet to come unless Creon acted swiftly. This last appeal brought Creon's conflicted emotions to a crescendo, the weight of familial bond tilting the scales of his decision. In the early hours of dawn, with the sky still cloaked in the soft hues of gray and amber, Creon came to his resolution. Standing on the palace balcony, overlooking the city that slumbered below, he felt the cool air wrap around him like a shroud of solemnity. His mind was finally made up. He had witnessed the clarity brought by the dawn, a new beginning that heralded change. The time for pride had passed. Now was the era of righting wrongs. Creon announced his decision. Antigone would be freed, and Polynices would receive a proper burial. The decree sighed through the lips of heralds, touching every corner of Thebes with the promise of looming redemption. Creon's heart, though heavy, felt an unfamiliar lightness, the tension between pride and humility settling into quiet resolve. Thus, the wheels of fate turned, setting in motion a series of events that moved inexorably toward the tragic epilogue of Antigone's tale. As the first light pierced the dark shrouds of Thebes, Creon approached the tomb with urgency in his heart. The morning carried with it a sense of solemn resolve, as the looming edifice of stone seemed to await his fateful arrival. The king's steps, once decisive, now faltered slightly with the weight of his decision to intervene. His mind, torn between the heavy chains of duty and the plaintive whispers of conscience, spurred him to haste. He had relented, resolved to undo the punishment he had wrought upon Antigone. But time, he feared, may not stand as a forgiving ally. Upon reaching the sealed entrance of the tomb, Creon found his guards gathered, tense and anxious. The air was thick with an unspoken anxiety, the silence only broken by the punctuated breaths of those waiting to fulfill the king's newfound directive. The task was daunting. The stone barrier served as both protector and prisoner to the fate of the young woman entombed within. The guards set to work with fervor, striving against the obstinate weight of stone, each heave loaded with hope and desperation. Their labors finally bore fruit as the entrance yawned open with a reluctant groan, revealing the dim, candlelit interior. As the shadows retreated, Creon's heart sank deeper into a well of dread. Inside lay Antigone, her lifeless form a silent testament to the cruel hand of fate and the king's too late change of heart. She had embraced eternity before the stone seal had been breached, choosing her end in defiant solitude rather than awaiting the possibility of release. Creon's grief was immediate and all-consuming, a wave that crashed over him as he knelt beside her. The tragic tableau spoke volumes more than words could convey, each flicker of the candle reflecting the light now forever extinguished in her eyes. The chorus of his thoughts screamed of his own failures, the chain of choices that had led to this irreversible moment. The weight of his hubris, once a shield, now served as the heaviest of burdens. As Creon remained engulfed by his remorse, Haemon arrived, driven by a desperate hope that quickly crumbled into despair. Confronted with the scene, his anguish erupted violently, a storm of sorrow and rage directed at both Creon and the inescapable design of fate. His cries echoed within the tomb's stone walls, each note a piercing lament of lost love and unfulfilled promise. Creon, though standing yards apart, felt the chasm between them widen, each silent accusation enlarging the void. In his grief-stricken state, Haemon confronted his father, the confrontation a subtle mix of sorrowful pleading and furious denunciation. There was no solace found in explanations nor comfort in paternal gestures. Rage unsated, Haemon turned the weapon of his wrath inward, choosing to join Antigone in death rather than endure a life forged by unbearable consequences. His decision came swiftly, a moment where silence seemed to hold its breath, before releasing Haemon into a final act of defiance and despair. The return to the palace was marked by an unbearable quietude, each echoing footstep laden with the news of tragedy that rippled swiftly through Thebes. The kingdom, having awaited redemption with bated breath, now braced against the tremors of fresh loss. Creon's visage reflected the utter desolation within, every line etched deeper by the realization of his hand in the doom that now encircled his lineage. As the castle and its inhabitants absorbed the weight of these events, Creon stood amidst the shadows of his hall, a ruler shaped by the missteps of pride, now painfully aware of the frailty that accompanies uncompromising authority. The truth, illuminated by the flickering candlelight, was unyielding. He had sought control over destiny, only to find himself a mere mortal bound by its immutable laws. The embrace of sorrow suffused the air, tangible and cold, a persistent companion in the hush that followed his every thought. The cruel hand of fate, irrevocable in its motion, had sealed its grasp upon him. And as that same hand moved towards its next touch, Creon understood with burning clarity the depth of his role in this sorrowful tale. A king, brought low by his own blind ambition, now facing the specter of further loss. Upon returning to the palace, Creon found himself enveloped in a profound and haunting silence. The recent tragedies weighed heavily on his shoulders, as though he carried the burden of Thebes itself. The once vibrant halls of the castle now seemed draped in mourning, echoing the emptiness that enveloped his heart. The memory of Antigone's defiance and Haemon's despair replayed ceaselessly in his mind, each moment a stark reminder of the cost of his unyielding pride. News of Eurydice's death soon reached him, revealing the full extent of fate's cruel hand. Driven to despair by the loss of her son, Haemon's mother took her own life, leaving Creon to confront yet another consequence of his decisions. Her absence now added another layer to the oppressive silence that filled the palace. Creon knew that his failure to heed the warnings of prophetic wisdom and his adherence to rigid laws had led to this moment, a cascading series of events that no mortal had the power to stop. Alone, Creon wandered through the palace corridors, each step a reminder of the life he once knew and the family he had lost. The empty throne room symbolized the void left in both his reign and his heart. The regal banners, which once draped proudly as emblems of his rule, now hung as solemn reminders of the fragility of human pride. The walls seemed to whisper of past glories and unheeded prophecies, their tales of hubris and heartache softer but undeniable. Outside, the chorus began to sing a lament, their mourning voices rising solemnly into the evening air. They spoke of the downfall that pride brings to even the mightiest leaders. The chorus's reflection served as an elegy to the myriad lives touched by unbending authority, and an acknowledgement of the inevitable cycle of human folly. In their song they remembered Antigone's legacy, a testament to individual strength against the inexorable tide of law and fate. Creon's mind turned inward, grappling with the stark reality of his solitude. How quickly fate rearranges the fortunes of men, he mused, lost in contemplation. Once surrounded by family and counsel, Creon now found himself alone with echoes of regret. The price of his arrogance, once seen as strength, had left his house desolate, a devastation so profound that even the heavy silence spoke of sorrow. Resigned to his newfound understanding, Creon reflected on the need for humility, a lesson learned far too late. The realization struck him deeply. Power devoid of wisdom leads to ruin. The divine laws, ancient and omnipotent, stand unyielding, a testament not to be ignored in favor of mortal decree. In acknowledging this, Creon found a semblance of peace, though it paled compared to the grief that weighed upon his soul. The castle, once alive with the vibrancy of court and council, now stood as a mausoleum to failed ambition and the heavy toll of misguided dominance. Creon gazed upon the remains of his family, the threads of his legacy unraveled but not forgotten. Amidst the shadows, his lament was both a farewell and a plea for forgiveness, a recognition of loss and longing for redemption. In the final meditations of the chorus, they pondered the intertwining paths of fate, the gods, and the enduring memory of Antigone. Through their elegy, they imparted the wisdom to Thebes and beyond, that true strength lies not in inflexible rule, but in recognizing the power of compassion and the humility to learn from one's crime. Mistakes. The enduring legacy of Antigone became a clarion call for justice tempered by humanity, a guiding light for those yet to walk the paths of power. With the fading light of day casting long shadows across the palace stones, Creon stood alone, his figure silhouetted against the remnants of his reign. The deep hues of the setting sun mirrored the burnt sienna of history, a story told time and again of pride overthrown by fate. In the quiet that remained, Thebes prepared to heal and begin anew, ever aware of the lessons etched into its soul by a gentle tragedy.